The dinner rush at Giovanni's restaurant was finally slowing down. It was nearly 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and Lisa's feet were killing her. She'd been on them since 11 that morning, running back and forth between tables carrying heavy trays, and forcing smiles even when customers were rude. She grabbed a clean cloth from behind the bar and started wiping down table 7. A family had just left and they'd made quite a mess. Crumbs everywhere, napkins on the floor, and a small puddle of spilled soda that had dripped onto one of the chairs. Lisa didn't mind, though. This was her life now, and she'd learned to accept it. 3 years. That's how long she'd been working at Giovanni's. 3 long years of double shifts, sore feet, and barely making enough to cover the bills. But she had no choice. Her 6-year-old daughter Mia was counting on her, and being a single mom meant doing whatever it took to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. As Lisa finished cleaning the table, she heard loud laughter coming from the private dining area in the back. That's where the restaurant seated its VIP guests, the ones who could afford to drop thousands of dollars on a single meal. Tonight, some wealthy businessman had reserved the entire section for a private party. Lisa had seen him arrive earlier in a chauffeur-driven car, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. She didn't pay much attention to rich people anymore. They came and went, living in a world so different from hers that it might as well be another planet. She'd learned not to feel bitter about it. Everyone had their own struggles, she told herself, even if some struggles came with a lot more money. Tony, her manager, walked past carrying a tray of expensive wine bottles. He was heading toward the VIP section. "Hey, Lisa," he called out. "When you're done there, can you check if table 12 needs anything? They've been nursing those coffees for a while." "Sure thing," Lisa replied, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Her ponytail was coming loose after the long shift, but there were still a couple of hours to go. She couldn't wait to get home, take off these uncomfortable shoes, and hug Mia goodnight. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was watching her daughter, and Lisa made a mental note to pick up some groceries tomorrow to thank her. The older woman never asked for payment, but Lisa always found small ways to show her appreciation. As she approached table 12 with a coffee pot for refills, another burst of laughter echoed from the VIP section. This time it was louder, more obnoxious. Lisa glanced over and saw the businessman standing up, gesturing dramatically while his guests laughed at something he'd said. Rich people and their jokes, she thought. Must be nice to have so much money that everything seems funny. She finished with table 12 and was heading back toward the kitchen when Tony intercepted her. "Lisa, the VIP section needs some water. Can you take care of it?" Her stomach tightened a little. She usually avoided the VIP section. Those guests always made her feel invisible, like she was just a robot programmed to bring them food and drinks. But Tony was looking at her expectantly, so she nodded. Of course. She filled a pitcher with ice water and walked toward the private dining area. As she entered, she immediately felt out of place. The room was elegantly decorated with dim lighting and expensive artwork on the walls. 8 people sat around a large table, all dressed in designer clothes, their jewelry catching the light. The businessman sat at the head of the table, still talking animatedly. Lisa quietly moved around the table, refilling water glasses. She'd learned to be almost invisible during moments like these. Don't make eye contact, don't interrupt conversations, just do your job and leave. That was the best way to avoid awkward situations. But as she reached for the glass in front of the businessman, he suddenly turned and looked directly at her. She froze for a second, pitcher in hand. "Tell me something," he said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Do you play piano?" Lisa blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" He gestured toward the corner of the room where a beautiful baby grand piano sat, its polished black surface gleaming under the soft lights. Lisa had noticed it before. The restaurant had bought it 2 years ago to create an upscale atmosphere, but as far as she knew, nobody ever played it. It was just there for decoration, like an expensive piece of furniture. "That piano," the businessman continued, a smirk playing on his lips. "Can you play it?" His guests had stopped their conversations and were now watching Lisa with amused expressions. She felt her cheeks getting warm. What kind of question was that? She was standing there in her waitress uniform, clearly in the middle of her shift, and this man was asking her about playing piano? I'm not sure what you mean, sir," she said carefully, keeping her voice polite and professional. The businessman leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "It's a simple question. I'm curious if our waitress here has any hidden talents. You see, I've always believed that you can't judge a book by its cover." He paused and his smirk widened. "So here's a deal. If you can sit down at that piano and play something, anything that sounds halfway decent, I'll give you $500 cash. Right here, right now." The table erupted in chuckles and whispers. Lisa felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. $500. That money could cover Mia's field trip to the Science Museum, the one she'd been excited about for weeks. It could pay the overdue electricity bill that had been stressing Lisa out. It could buy groceries for an entire month, but this wasn't a genuine offer. She could hear it in his tone. He was making fun of her, entertaining his wealthy friends by putting the poor waitress on the spot. He probably assumed she couldn't play a single note, that she'd embarrass herself trying and they'd all have a good laugh at her expense. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she held the water pitcher. Her mind was racing. She wanted to tell him to keep his money, to walk away with her dignity intact. But $500, that wasn't a small amount of money. Not to her. Not to someone who counted every penny and sometimes had to choose between paying bills or buying Mia new shoes. She glanced toward the entrance of the VIP section and saw Tony standing there, watching. He looked concerned but gave her a small nod, as if to say it was her choice. The businessman was still watching her with that amused expression, waiting for her to either accept his challenge or slink away defeated. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Lisa hadn't always been a waitress. Years ago, before life had knocked her down and forced her onto this path, she'd been someone completely different. She'd had dreams once, big dreams that seemed impossible now. Lisa set down the water pitcher carefully on a nearby serving table. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was a terrible idea. She should just walk away. But something inside her, something that had been sleeping for years, suddenly stirred. She looked at the businessman and his expectant guests. Then she looked at the piano in the corner, its keys waiting silently. "Okay," she heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." The room went quiet for a moment. Then the businessman clapped his hands together once, loudly. "Wonderful. This should be entertaining. Please go ahead. Show us what you've got." Lisa walked toward the piano, each step feeling surreal. What was she doing? This was crazy, but she couldn't stop now. She reached the piano bench and sat down slowly, her hands hovering over the keys. It had been so long. Would she even remember? Could she still do this after all these years? She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The cool, smooth surface felt both foreign and familiar at the same time. Behind her, she could hear someone whisper, "This is going to be painful to watch." But Lisa closed her eyes and let her fingers remember what her mind had tried to forget. Lisa's fingers rested on the piano keys, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The wealthy businessman and his laughing guests, the restaurant sounds from the other room, even her own nervousness, all of it faded into the background. There was just her and this instrument that had once been her entire world. She didn't start with something simple. She couldn't. If she was going to do this, if she was going to expose this part of herself that she'd kept hidden for so long, she needed to play something real, something that mattered. Her fingers found the opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, one of the most beautiful and difficult pieces ever written. The first notes rang out clear and pure. Lisa felt a shiver run down her spine. It had been 9 years since she'd played like this. 9 years since she'd sat at a piano and let the music flow through her. But her fingers remembered. They remembered every chord, every transition, every delicate moment and powerful crescendo. The music filled the room, rich and complex. Behind her, Lisa heard the laughter stop. The whispered jokes and amused comments went silent. She didn't turn around to look. She couldn't. She was somewhere else now, transported back to a time when music was everything to her. The businessman's smirk had completely vanished. He sat perfectly still, staring at Lisa's back as her fingers flew across the keys. His wife, sitting next to him, had tears running down her cheeks. One of his business partners was recording on his phone, his hand shaking slightly because he didn't want to miss a single moment of what he was witnessing. Lisa reached the most challenging section of the piece, where the left and right hands played different complex patterns simultaneously. It required complete coordination, years of practice, and deep understanding of the music. She navigated it flawlessly, her body swaying slightly with the emotion of the piece. She thought about all the times she'd walked past piano stores and felt her heart ache, all the times she'd heard classical music playing somewhere and had to fight back tears, all the times Mia had asked her, "Mommy, what did you want to be when you grew up?" And she'd smiled and said, "Oh, lots of things, sweetie," because the truth was too painful to speak out loud. The music built to its powerful climax, filling every corner of the restaurant. Some people in the growing crowd had their eyes closed, completely absorbed in the moment. Others watched Lisa with expressions of awe and disbelief. How could this waitress, this ordinary woman in a simple uniform, create something so extraordinary? But Lisa wasn't ordinary. She never had been. Life had just convinced her that she was. Circumstances had forced her to put her gifts aside, to focus on survival instead of dreams. Society had made her invisible, just another service worker that people looked through rather than at. But the music didn't lie. The music revealed who she really was. As she played the final notes, letting them fade slowly into silence, Lisa realized she was crying. Tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the piano keys. She hadn't meant to cry. She'd wanted to be strong, to prove something to these wealthy people who'd looked at her like she was nothing, but the emotion was too powerful to contain. For several seconds after she finished, there was complete silence. Lisa sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, afraid to turn around and face the reality of what she'd just done. Had she really just played Rachmaninoff in the middle of her shift at an Italian restaurant? What had she been thinking? Then the applause started. It began with one person clapping, then two, then suddenly the entire restaurant erupted. People were cheering, some whistling, others calling out words of amazement. The sound was overwhelming. Lisa turned around slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The businessman stood up from his seat. His face looked completely different now. The mockery was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame mixed with genuine respect. He walked toward her and the crowd quieted down to watch. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "That was the most incredible thing I've heard in years. I don't even know what to say." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. But instead of pulling out $500 like he'd promised, he took out everything that was inside. Lisa watched as he counted it quickly. There were mostly $100 bills. "There's $5,000 here," he said quietly, holding it out to her. "It's not nearly enough for what you just shared with us, but please take it." Lisa stared at the money, her mind unable to process what was happening. $5,000. That was more money than she'd made in the last 3 months combined. Her hands shook as she reached out and took it. The bills felt heavy in her palm, weighted with possibility. "Where did you learn to play like that?" the businessman asked, his voice gentle now, completely different from the mocking tone he'd used earlier. Lisa took a shaky breath. "I studied at the Harrison Conservatory," she said softly. "I was going to be a concert pianist. That was the plan anyway. But my parents died in a car crash when I was 19. I lost everything. The scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses, and I couldn't afford to stay. I had to drop out and find work. Then I got pregnant and, well, life just kept happening. Music became something I used to do, a past life that didn't fit with my present reality." Several people in the crowd were crying now, including the businessman's wife. Tony was wiping his eyes, pretending he had something in them. Even some of the tough-looking kitchen staff looked emotional. The businessman nodded slowly, processing her words. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a business card. "My name is David," he said, handing it to her. "I run a technology company, but I also fund various causes and projects. Music education is actually something I'm passionate about. My mother was a piano teacher, and she always told me that talent should never be wasted because of circumstances." He paused. "I want to help you. I want to help you get back to music. Call me tomorrow, okay? I'm serious about this. We need to talk." Lisa looked at the card, then back at David. She wanted to believe him, but she'd learned to be cautious. Rich people sometimes made promises in emotional moments that they forgot about the next day. Still, she tucked the card carefully into her apron pocket along with the money. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for challenging me. I haven't played like that in 9 years. David shook his head. "No, thank you. You reminded me tonight why I do what I do. You reminded me that everyone has a story, and we should never assume we know anything about a person based on their job or appearance." He looked genuinely moved. "That was a gift you gave us. A real gift. As the crowd slowly dispersed and people returned to their tables, still buzzing with excitement, Lisa sat back down at the piano bench for a moment. She was trembling all over, adrenaline and emotion coursing through her body. Tony approached and squeezed her shoulder gently. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked softly. Lisa shrugged, fresh tears forming in her eyes. "What was I supposed to say? Hi, I'm Lisa. I used to be a musician, but now I serve pasta." It felt like bragging about a life I don't have anymore. "That's not bragging," Tony said firmly. "That's just who you are. This is who you are." He gestured at the piano. Lisa looked down at the money still clutched in her hand, then at the business card in her pocket. Could this really be happening? Could one moment, one performance actually change everything? She didn't know. But for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Lisa barely slept that night. She kept the $5,000 hidden in an envelope under her mattress, checking on it every few hours like it might disappear if she didn't keep an eye on it. Each time she looked at it, she had to remind herself that it was real. This had actually happened. Mia had been asleep when Lisa got home around midnight. Mrs. Patterson had smiled knowingly when she saw Lisa's red, puffy eyes. "Rough night at work?" she'd asked gently. "You could say that," Lisa had replied, managing a small laugh. She'd hugged the older woman extra tight before she left, thinking about how she could finally pay her properly for all those hours of babysitting. Now it was morning, and Mia was eating cereal at their small kitchen table, chattering about something that happened at school. Lisa was only half listening. She kept touching the business card in her pocket, pulling it out to read the name again. David Chen, founder and CEO, Tech Vision Industries. There was a phone number and an email address printed in simple, elegant letters. Should she call? What if it had all been just a moment of emotion for him? What if he woke up this morning and regretted the whole thing? Rich people lived in a different world. Maybe helping a struggling waitress seemed like a good idea last night. But in the bright light of day, he probably had more important things to think about. "Mommy, you're not listening," Mia complained, putting down her spoon. "Sorry, baby. What did you say?" "I said that Jessica brought her hamster to show and tell and it pooped on Mrs. Wilson's desk." Mia giggled at the memory. Lisa smiled despite her swirling thoughts. That must have been exciting. After dropping Mia at school, Lisa sat in her old car for a long moment, staring at her phone. She had 3 hours before her afternoon shift at Giovanni started. 3 hours to decide whether to call this number or just accept the $5,000 as an amazing gift and move on with her regular life. But what if this was her chance? What if she let fear stop her from something that could change everything? Her hands shook as she dialed the number. It rang twice before a professional-sounding woman answered. "Tech Vision Industries, how may I direct your call?" Lisa's voice came out scratchy. Hi, my name is Lisa Rodriguez. I'm calling for David Chen. He gave me his card last night and asked me to call." There was a brief pause. "Oh yes, Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen is expecting your call. Please hold for just one moment." Lisa's heart hammered in her chest. He was expecting her call. That meant he remembered. That meant he'd been serious. David's voice came on the line, warm and genuine. "Lisa, I'm so glad you called. I wasn't sure if you would." "To be honest, I almost didn't," Lisa admitted. "I thought maybe you'd wake up today and forget all about the waitress who played piano." "Forget?" David laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was kind. "Lisa, my wife and I talked about your performance until 2 in the morning. We watched the video my colleague recorded at least 10 times. What you did last night was extraordinary, and I meant every word I said. I want to help you get back to music." She'd been 17 when she first performed this piece. It was at her final recital at the Harrison Conservatory, one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Her parents had been so proud, sitting in the front row with tears in their eyes. Her teacher had told her she had a gift, that she could have a real career as a concert pianist if she wanted it. The world had seemed full of possibility back then. Lisa's hands moved faster, the music building in intensity. She poured everything into it. All the pain of losing her parents in that accident when she was 19. All the fear of suddenly being alone in the world with no money and no support. All the dreams she'd had to abandon when she discovered she was pregnant, and the baby's father wanted nothing to do with them. All the exhaustion of working multiple jobs just to survive. All the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering if life would ever get easier. But she also put in the good things. The moment she first held Mia in her arms and knew she'd do anything for her. The sound of her daughter's laughter. The small victories like making it through another month with the bills paid. The strength she'd discovered she had even when she felt like giving up. All of it went into the music. In the main dining room, other customers started standing up from their tables. They moved toward the VIP section, trying to see where this incredible music was coming from. Waiters stopped mid-service. The bartender put down the glass he was polishing. Even the cooks came out from the kitchen drawn by the sound. Tony stood frozen near the entrance, his mouth slightly open. He'd worked with Lisa for 3 years and had no idea she could do this. None of them did. To everyone at Giovanni's, she was just Lisa, the hard-working single mom who picked up extra shifts and never complained. Nobody knew about the conservatory, about the scholarship she'd earned, about the future she'd once had mapped out so clearly. Lisa felt tears prick her eyes again. She seemed to cry a lot lately. "I don't understand why you'd want to help me. You don't even know me." "That's fair," David said thoughtfully. "Let me tell you something I don't share with many people. My mother immigrated to this country with nothing. She was an incredible pianist back in Taiwan, but here she had to work 3 jobs to support us. She cleaned houses, worked in a factory, and gave piano lessons on weekends to kids whose parents could actually afford them. She never got to pursue her own dreams because she was too busy making sure I could pursue mine." He paused, and Lisa could hear the emotion in his voice. "She died 5 years ago, and I've spent every day since then wishing I'd done more to help her, to give her back some of what she sacrificed. When I saw you last night, when I heard you play, it was like the universe was giving me a second chance, a chance to do for someone else what I should have done for my mother." Lisa wiped her eyes with her free hand. "I'm so sorry about your mother. Thank you. She would have loved your playing." David cleared his throat. "So here's what I'm proposing. I want to fund your return to music. That means covering the cost for you to finish your degree at whatever school you choose. I'll provide a living stipend so you can reduce your work hours or stop working altogether if needed. I'll also pay for childcare for your daughter so you can focus on your studies and practice." Lisa couldn't speak. She literally couldn't make words come out of her mouth. David continued, "In exchange, I'd ask 3 things from you. First, perform at charity events that I organize. I host several fundraisers throughout the year, and having a talented pianist would be wonderful. Second, I'd like you to teach piano to underprivileged kids once you're back on your feet. Help other people who might not otherwise have access to music education. And third, just be successful. Show the world what you're capable of. That's all I ask." "I don't know what to say." Lisa finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is too much. This is too generous." "It's not too much if it changes your life," David replied simply. "Look, I know this is overwhelming. Take some time to think about it. Talk it over with family or friends. But Lisa, I'm completely serious about this offer. I have lawyers who can draw up the paperwork, make it official. This isn't charity. This is an investment in talent that deserves to be shared with the world." After the call ended, Lisa sat in her car and cried. Not sad tears this time, but tears of relief mixed with disbelief, mixed with hope, mixed with fear. Could she really do this? Could she really go back to school, back to music after all these years? She was 28 years old. Most concert pianists started training as children and never stopped. She'd had almost a decade away from serious practice. But then she thought about Mia, about showing her daughter that dreams don't have expiration dates, about teaching her that it's never too late to try again. That afternoon at Giovanni's, the atmosphere was completely different. Everyone knew what had happened. The video from last night had been shared on social media, and it was going viral. Tony showed her his phone during her break. "Look at this. 2 million views already. People are calling you the piano waitress. The comments are incredible." Lisa scrolled through some of the comments, her eyes widening. People from all over the world were writing about how her story inspired them. A 50-year-old man said he was going to take guitar lessons, something he'd always wanted to do but thought he was too old for. A young woman wrote that she'd given up on her art career but was going to try again. A father said he showed the video to his kids to teach them that everyone has hidden talents and dreams. But not everyone was supportive. Some of her coworkers had mixed reactions. Rachel, another waitress who'd worked there longer than Lisa, made a snide comment during the shift change. "Must be nice to be so lucky. Some of us work just as hard and don't get millionaires handing us money." Lisa felt the sting of the words but tried not to let it show. It wasn't luck, Rachel. I trained for years before my life fell apart. I earned that skill. Whatever, Rachel muttered, walking away. Later, one of the regular customers, an older gentleman who'd been coming to Giovanni's for years, pulled Lisa aside. I saw what happened last night on the news. I just want to say I'm proud of you, young lady. You reminded me that we're all more than our circumstances. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about this opportunity. You grab it with both hands and don't look back. His words meant more than he knew. Lisa thanked him with a genuine smile. Over the next few days, Lisa had several more conversations with David. She met with his lawyers, reviewed contracts, and slowly began to believe this was actually happening. David helped her apply to a nearby music college that had an excellent piano program. Because of her previous training at the conservatory and the viral video of her performance, the school was eager to accept her. The hardest part was allowing herself to hope. Lisa had spent so many years just surviving, just getting through each day, that the idea of actually thriving felt dangerous. What if she failed? What if she wasn't as good as she used to be? What if people expected too much from her now? She confided these fears to Mrs. Patterson one evening while picking up Mia. The older woman listened carefully, then smiled. Honey, fear is just a sign that something matters to you. If you weren't scared, it would mean you didn't care. But you do care. And that's exactly why you need to do this. Lisa made her decision on a Sunday afternoon. She was sitting in the small park near their apartment, watching Mia play on the swings. Her daughter's laughter rang out clear and pure, and Lisa thought about the life she wanted to give her. Not just material things, but something more important. She wanted to show Mia what courage looked like, what it meant to face your fears and try anyway. She pulled out her phone and called David. "I'm in," she said when he answered. "I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to try again." She could hear the smile in his voice. "That's wonderful, Lisa. I'm so glad. We're going to make this work. You're going to be amazing." That night, Lisa gave her 2 weeks' notice at Giovanni's. Tony wasn't surprised. He hugged her and told her she'd better come back to visit. Some of her coworkers congratulated her warmly. Others remained distant and cool. Lisa understood. Her good fortune highlighted their continued struggles, and that wasn't easy to watch. But as she walked to her car after that final conversation with Tony, Lisa felt something she hadn't felt in 9 long years. She felt like herself again. Not the surviving version of herself, but the real version. The one who had dreams and talent and hope. The scared part of her whispered that this might all fall apart. But the brave part, the part that had sat down at that piano and poured out her soul in front of strangers, whispered back that maybe, just maybe, this was her second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. The first month back in school was harder than Lisa had imagined. She'd forgotten how demanding music training could be. Her fingers ached from hours of practice. Her brain felt foggy trying to remember music theory she hadn't thought about in years, and the other students, most of them fresh out of high school, looked at her with curiosity mixed with something that might have been pity. Professor Chen, her main piano instructor and no relation to David despite sharing a last name, was a stern woman in her 60s who didn't believe in going easy on anyone. During their first private lesson, she listened to Lisa play for about 30 seconds before holding up her hand. "Stop. Your technique has deteriorated significantly. We need to rebuild from the basics." Lisa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I know I'm rusty. I just need some time to get back into it." "Rusty?" Professor Chen raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Rodriguez, you're not a piece of old machinery. You're a musician who stopped practicing for 9 years. That's not rust. That's atrophy. But," she added, her expression softening slightly, "I watched your video. The emotion is there. The soul is there. We just need to match your technique to your passion. It will take work. A lot of work. Are you prepared for that?" Lisa nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, I'm ready, and she was, sort of. The problem was that being ready and actually doing it were two different things. Lisa practiced 4 hours a day, sometimes more. Her hands cramped. She had headaches from concentration. And every time she made a mistake, every time her fingers stumbled over a passage that used to be easy, a little voice in her head whispered that maybe she was too old. Maybe she'd waited too long. Maybe this was all a huge mistake. The hardest part wasn't the physical training, though. It was the emotional weight of it all. Lisa had gotten used to keeping her head down, not expecting much from life, just surviving day by day. Now people had expectations. David checked in regularly. always encouraging, but still she felt the pressure not to disappoint him. The music school had given her a partial scholarship after the video went viral, and she felt obligated to prove she deserved it. Even strangers on social media followed her journey, commenting on every update, cheering her on, but also watching, always watching. One evening, about 6 weeks into the program, Lisa sat at the practice room piano with tears streaming down her face. She'd been working on a Chopin piece for 3 hours and couldn't get one particular section right. Her fingers kept fumbling the same transition over and over. She was exhausted, frustrated, and starting to doubt everything. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel, her former co-worker at Giovanni's. "Saw your practice video on Instagram. Looks tough. At least you don't have to deal with angry customers anymore though, LOL." The message stung more than Rachel probably intended. Lisa had posted a short clip of herself practicing earlier that day, trying to show her followers the reality behind the fairy tale. But Rachel's message highlighted something Lisa had been feeling but not wanting to admit. Some people were waiting for her to fail. Not everyone was rooting for her success. She put her head down on the piano keys, not caring that it made a discordant sound. What was she doing? She had a 6-year-old daughter at home who needed her. Yes, David's money paid for excellent childcare. But Mia had asked that morning why Mommy was always tired, always stressed, always practicing. Was this worth it? There was a soft knock on the practice room door. Lisa lifted her head, quickly wiping her eyes. An older student, a woman probably in her early 40s, peeked her head in. "Sorry, I heard you playing earlier and I just wanted to say it sounded beautiful. Well, until that last part. You okay?" Lisa laughed despite herself, a wet, messy sound. "Not really. I'm starting to think I bit off more than I can chew." The woman came in and sat down on the bench beside her. "I'm Jennifer. I'm a graduate student here. This is my 3rd year back after a 15-year break. I used to play professionally, then had 4 kids, then my husband left me, then I worked as a bank teller for 10 years. Now I'm here trying to remember what I used to be." "How do you do it?" Lisa asked. "How do you keep going when it feels impossible?" Jennifer smiled. "Honestly, some days I don't know. But I remember why I came back. It wasn't for fame or money or to prove anything to anyone else. It was because music is part of who I am. When I wasn't playing, I felt like I was missing a limb. Does that make sense?" Lisa nodded slowly. It made perfect sense. "The pressure you're feeling," Jennifer continued, "it's not really about the music, is it? It's about everyone watching. Everyone expecting things. That video of you went everywhere, and now you're not just a student, you're a symbol. The comeback story. The inspiration. And that's a heavy weight to carry." "Yes," Lisa whispered. "Exactly. What if I can't live up to what people expect?" "Then you don't," Jennifer said simply. "You just be yourself. You make the music you can make. Some days it'll be brilliant. Some days it'll be terrible. That's what being human is. The people who truly care about you will understand that. The ones who don't, well, they were never really on your side anyway." After Jennifer left, Lisa sat quietly for a long time. Then she started playing again, but differently this time. She stopped trying to be perfect. She played the Chopin piece slowly, focusing on the emotion rather than the technical precision. And something shifted. The music started to breathe again. Things got better after that night, but not in a straight line. Some days were good. Lisa would have a breakthrough, nail a difficult piece, receive praise from Professor Chen. Other days were hard. She'd struggle with basic scales, feel inadequate compared to the younger students, miss important moments with Mia because of practice schedules. About 4 months into her program, David invited Lisa to perform at her first charity event. It was a fundraiser for music education in underprivileged schools, held at a fancy hotel downtown. Lisa was terrified. This wasn't a spontaneous moment in a restaurant anymore. This was planned. People were buying tickets specifically to see her play. What if she froze? What if she messed up? The night of the performance, Lisa stood backstage in a borrowed dress, her hands shaking. Mia was in the audience with Mrs. Patterson, and knowing her daughter was watching made it both better and worse. She wanted Mia to be proud of her, but she also didn't want to embarrass herself in front of her. David found her backstage. "You're going to be great," he said gently. "What if I'm not?" Lisa asked, her voice small. "What if this was all a mistake? What if I'm just a waitress who happens to play piano, not an actual pianist?" David looked at her seriously. "Lisa, do you know why I really wanted to help you? It wasn't just because you reminded me of my mother. It was because when I challenged you that night at the restaurant, you could have said no. You could have walked away, kept your dignity, avoided the risk of embarrassment, but you didn't. You sat down at that piano even though you were scared, even though those people were ready to mock you, even though you hadn't played in years. That took real courage, he paused. You're not just a waitress who plays piano. You're a musician who had to work as a waitress to survive. There's a big difference. The waitressing was what you did. The music is who you are. Don't forget that. Lisa took a deep breath and nodded. When she walked out onto that stage and saw the hundreds of people in the audience, her heart hammered in her chest. But then she saw Mia in the third row, sitting on the edge of her seat, eyes wide with excitement. Her little girl waved at her, a huge smile on her face. Lisa sat at the grand piano and placed her hands on the keys. She thought about everything she'd been through. The loss, the struggle, the fear, the doubt, but also the hope, the support, the second chances. She thought about Jennifer's words. Just be yourself.
Make the music you can make. She began to play.
It wasn't perfect. She noticed a few small mistakes, places where her fingers didn't quite hit the right notes, but it was honest. It was real. It was her story told through music, all the pain and joy and everything in between. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. But what mattered most was seeing Mia standing up, clapping harder than anyone, shouting, "That's my mommy," loud enough for half the room to hear. Later that night, after the event, after she'd tucked Mia into bed and the little girl had fallen asleep with a huge smile on her face, Lisa sat on her couch and looked at her phone. The video from tonight's performance was already circulating online. The comments were mostly positive, but there were negative ones too. People criticizing her technique, saying she wasn't as good as the viral video made her seem, questioning whether she really deserved all this attention. Lisa read them and felt the familiar sting of self-doubt creeping in. But then she remembered something Professor Chen had told her earlier that week. The audience will always have opinions. Some will love you. Some will hate you. Some will be indifferent. None of that matters as much as whether you love what you're doing. Are you making music for them or for yourself? Lisa closed the comments section and opened her text messages instead. There was one from David. "You were magnificent tonight. My mother would have been so proud." One from Tony at Giovanni's. "Saw the video. You crushed it. We all miss you here, but we're so happy for you." One from Jennifer. "Beautiful performance, see? You can do this." And one from Mrs. Patterson. "Mia hasn't stopped talking about how her mommy is the best piano player in the whole world. That child adores you. You're doing something important, not just for yourself, but for her. Keep going." Lisa set down her phone and walked to Mia's room. She stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep peacefully, a small smile still on her face. This was why she was doing this, not for the viral videos or the charity events or the comments from strangers. She was doing it to show her daughter that dreams don't die just because life gets hard. That it's okay to fall down as long as you get back up. That being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the thing even though you're terrified. Lisa was still scared. She still had doubts. She still had hard days. But she was doing it anyway. And that, she was beginning to realize, was what mattered most. 18 months after that night at Giovanni's restaurant, Lisa stood backstage at the Morrison Concert Hall, the same venue where she'd attended concerts as a teenager, dreaming of one day performing on that stage. Tonight that dream was finally coming true. This was her debut recital, the culmination of everything she'd worked for since returning to music. She peeked through the curtain at the filling auditorium. The seats were nearly full. She spotted Mia in the front row, now 7 years old, sitting between Mrs. Patterson and David's wife. David sat a few seats down with some of his business colleagues. Tony from Giovanni's was there with half the restaurant staff, all dressed up for the occasion. Professor Chen sat in the 5th row, her usual stern expression softened slightly. Jennifer, her friend from school, gave her a thumbs up from the middle section, but it was the empty seats in the front row that made Lisa's breath catch. 2 seats side by side with single roses laid across them. Those seats were for her parents. They should have been here to see this. They would have been so proud. A stage manager touched her shoulder gently. 5 minutes, Ms. Rodriguez." Lisa nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had carried heavy trays and scrubbed tables for years. The same hands that had held Mia as a newborn when she was terrified and alone. The same hands that had trembled as she accepted $5,000 from a stranger who believed in her. Now these hands were about to do what they were always meant to do. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The early morning practice sessions before Mia woke up. The late nights studying music theory after putting her daughter to bed. The moments of doubt when she almost quit. The small victories that kept her going. The people who supported her and the ones who doubted her. All of it had led to this moment. The stage manager gave her the signal. Lisa took a deep breath, whispered a quick prayer to her parents, and walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and warm. Lisa smiled and bowed, then sat at the beautiful concert grand piano. The spotlight was hot on her skin, but she barely noticed. She placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes for just a moment, and began to play. She'd chosen her program carefully. She started with the same Rachmaninoff piece she'd played that night at the restaurant, the one that had changed everything. But this time she played it differently. Better technique, yes, but also with deeper understanding. She'd lived more life since then. She knew what it meant to struggle and persevere. That knowledge poured through her fingers into the music. As she played, Lisa wasn't thinking about the audience or potential mistakes. She was thinking about her journey. Each piece she performed told a part of her story. A Chopin nocturne for the quiet nights when she'd rocked Mia to sleep, wondering if they'd be okay. A Beethoven sonata for the anger and frustration she'd felt at life's unfairness. A Debussy prelude for the moments of unexpected beauty she'd found even in difficult times. In the audience, people were completely absorbed. Some had tears in their eyes. Others sat perfectly still, not wanting to break the spell. Mia watched her mother with absolute awe, her little hands clasped together. When Lisa played the final piece, a contemporary composition she'd discovered during her studies, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about proving she could do it anymore. This wasn't about living up to expectations or making up for lost time. This was simply about sharing something beautiful with the world. This was about being fully, completely herself. The final notes rang out and faded into silence. For a heartbeat, the entire auditorium was perfectly quiet. Then the applause exploded. People stood, cheering and clapping. Mia was jumping up and down. Mrs. Patterson was crying. Tony was whistling loudly. Even Professor Chen was on her feet, a rare smile on her face. Lisa stood and bowed, tears streaming down her cheeks. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Not perfectly. She'd caught a few small errors, but honestly and fully. She'd shown up for herself in a way she never thought possible. After the performance, there was a small reception in the lobby. Lisa was overwhelmed by people wanting to congratulate her, to take photos, to tell her how much her story had inspired them. But the moment she treasured most was when Mia ran up to her and threw her arms around her waist. "Mommy, you were so amazing. Everyone was crying because you were so beautiful." Lisa knelt down and hugged her daughter tight. "Thank you, baby. Having you here tonight meant everything to me. Are you still going to be my mommy even though you're famous now?" Mia asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Lisa pulled back and looked at her daughter seriously. "I will always be your mommy first, always. Nothing will ever change that. You're the reason I had the courage to try again. Do you know that?" Mia nodded, satisfied, and skipped off to get cookies from the refreshment table. David approached with his wife. "Lisa, that was extraordinary. I knew you were talented, but tonight you proved you're an artist. A real artist. I still can't believe this is my life now," Lisa admitted. "Sometimes I wake up and think I'm going to be late for my shift at the restaurant." David laughed. "Well, speaking of new chapters, I have something to discuss with you. But it can wait until you've had time to celebrate tonight." "Tell me now," Lisa urged. "The suspense will kill me, all right? You know how I've been passionate about music education for underprivileged kids? I want to start a foundation, and I want you to be a central part of it, not just as a performer but as a teacher and mentor. We'd find talented kids who are working jobs like you were. Kids whose gifts are hidden because they're just trying to survive. We'd give them the same chance I gave you." Lisa felt her eyes fill with tears again. "Are you serious?" "Completely. We'd call it something meaningful. I was thinking Second Chances Music Foundation or maybe Hidden Talents. I wanted your input." David smiled. "You've lived this experience. You know what these kids need, what would have helped you. I have the resources, but you have the understanding." "Yes," Lisa said immediately. "Absolutely yes. This is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do. Over the next few months, Lisa's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined. She balanced performing, teaching at the music college part-time, and working with David to establish the foundation. They started small, identifying 5 students in their first year. All of them were working adults with hidden talents, people who'd given up on their dreams because life got in the way. One of their first students was a 40-year-old grocery store clerk named Rita, who played violin beautifully, but hadn't touched her instrument in 15 years. Another was a young man named James who worked night shifts as a security guard and wrote symphonies on his phone during breaks. Each person had a story, a gift, and a reason why they'd stopped pursuing it. Lisa met with each of them individually, sharing her own story, listening to theirs. "I'm not going to tell you this will be easy," she told them during their first group meeting. "It's going to be hard. Some days you'll want to quit. Some days you'll doubt yourself so much you'll wonder why you even started. But if music is part of who you are, if it's something you need to do to feel whole, then it's worth the struggle." The foundation also did something else that was important to Lisa. Once a month, she went back to Giovanni's restaurant to play the piano during dinner service. She donated her performance fee to the restaurant's staff emergency fund, a fund that helped workers who faced unexpected hardships. Tony had started it after Lisa's story made him realize how many of his employees were one emergency away from disaster. On these nights, Lisa played for the waiters and waitresses, the cooks and dishwashers, the people who worked hard for little recognition. Sometimes current employees, sometimes former ones, sometimes just regular customers who appreciated seeing where her journey began. It kept her grounded, reminded her of where she'd come from and how easily life could have gone differently. Rachel, her former co-worker who'd been cold to her, showed up one of these nights. After Lisa finished playing, Rachel approached hesitantly. "That was really beautiful," she said quietly. "Look, I owe you an apology. I was jealous when all this happened for you. I wanted something magical to happen in my life too, and I took my frustration out on you. That wasn't fair." Lisa smiled and hugged her. "I understand. Really, I do. Life isn't fair, and sometimes it's hard to watch other people get opportunities we don't have. But Rachel, you have gifts too. Everyone does. Maybe they're not the same as mine, but they're there. What do you love to do?" Rachel looked surprised by the question. "I've always loved writing. I keep journals, write stories sometimes, but it's just a hobby." "Maybe it doesn't have to be," Lisa said gently. "Maybe it's worth exploring. I know some people in the arts community now. If you're serious about writing, I could introduce you to a few folks. See if we can help you develop that talent." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You'd do that for me? After I was so awful to you? Of course. Everyone deserves a second chance." 5 years after that night when a wealthy businessman challenged a tired waitress to play piano, Lisa's life looked completely different. She performed regularly at prestigious venues. She taught masterclasses. She ran a thriving foundation that had helped dozens of people return to their artistic passions. She'd published a book about her experience called The Piano Waitress, which became a bestseller and inspired countless people. But the thing she was most proud of wasn't any of those accomplishments. It was the relationship she'd built with Mia, who now took piano lessons herself, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It was seeing her foundation students succeed, watching them discover they were capable of more than they believed. It was the thank you notes she received from people who said her story gave them courage to try again at something they'd given up on. One evening, Lisa sat at her own piano at home, a beautiful instrument David had given her as a gift. Mia was doing homework at the kitchen table. Life was quiet, peaceful, full. "Mommy," Mia called out, "we have to write about our hero for school." "Can I write about you?" Lisa smiled. "Baby, I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who got a second chance and decided to take it." "That's exactly why you're a hero," Mia said matter-of-factly. "You were scared, but you did it anyway. That's what heroes do." Lisa looked at her wise little daughter and felt her heart swell with love. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe heroism wasn't about being fearless or perfect. Maybe it was just about showing up, doing your best, and helping others along the way. She turned back to the piano and began to play, not for an audience or a performance, but simply because it brought her joy. The music filled their small apartment, and Lisa realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not fame or recognition or even financial security, though those things were nice. What she'd found was herself. The real version, the complete version, the version that had always been there waiting to be rediscovered, and that, Lisa thought as her fingers danced across the keys, was worth every struggle it took to get here.